Have you heard the news? Basic Folk is now an official production of the Bluegrass Situation. We're leveling up on our folk pod game with our besties at BGS with a new logo, theme song, and a brand new attitude.
That's right, except I have the same bad attitude as last year. And our honest conversations with folk musicians continue to dignify under-the-radar roots musicians.
2025 is off to a great start with episodes featuring Jerry Douglas.
Every 15 to 20 years in bluegrass music, there is a renaissance period, and I believe we're in one right now.
Lutalo.
The act of writing and creativity is my meditation practice.
And Carolyn Kendrick.
The most important thing is how do we try to mitigate harm?
Find us where you get your shows or at thebluegrasssituation.com. Thanks for listening and welcome to Basic Folk.
Hello, my name is Olivia Harding, and I am the host of Folk Files, a podcast that explores the tangled history of folk songs. Every month, I choose a topic to dive into for about 20 to 30 minutes. The subject of each episode could be a song. In the case of Shady Grove, a lot of people believe that it is a later version of the English folk song Matty Groves, but it's not that simple. A general topic. The main theme that I saw while researching folk songs about birds from all over the world is that many of them include nonsense syllables meant to represent the bird songs. Or a question that I want to answer. There has never been any real question that Black people were central to the development of this musical style. So why do we still picture white men hauling on the rope when we think of sea shanties? Folk Files is available everywhere you listen to podcasts. Press play and join me on a journey through the origins of murder ballads, sea shanties, rebel songs, and other music that has withstood the test of time.
Hi, and welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the Bluegrass Situation. It's me, Cindy House, the host of this podcast, here with singer-songwriter and our good buddy, Mark Erelli. Hey, Mark.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, so good. So happy that you're here today. Mark is actually guest hosting on Basic Folk today. He's going to be interviewing the one, the only Gary Louris of the Jayhawks fame. We are pumped. Before we get into that, let's get down to business, please. If you have not signed up for the Basic Folk mailing list, here is me asking you from the bottom of my heart to click on the link in the show notes, sign up for the mailing list. It's a once-a-month email, and it lets you know what's going on with the podcast, and it's the best way to stay in touch. If we must do this, Basic Folk is on social media at Basic Folk Pod, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky. Just signed up for Blue Sky. If you need those links, they are in the show notes, or you can check out basicfolk.com. We are a listener-supported podcast. You can help us out financially. Give us $5 a month. Get a Basic Folk beanie featuring the brand new logo. Also, those beanies are handmade by my mom. It's a family operation. I get an email that says we have a new contribution, and then I text my mom, and then she asks me what colors do they want, and then I tell her, and then that it's like a real. I did not go to business school, so that's how it works behind the scenes. If you'd like to be a contributor to Basic Folk, thank you very much, and you can find that link in the show notes or basicfolk.com. Mark Erelli, before we get into the meat of the episode today, I have some stats that I want to share with you.
All right, hit me with the facts.
Okay, Mark Erelli, this is episode 299 of Basic Folk. You have been on Basic Folk. This will be your 6th appearance.
Wow.
Your first appearance was on episode 6, Synchronicity.
Ooh, wow.
And you were my first concert at Club Passim. I think you already knew that one. But.
Yes, those are all amazing statistics. Kind of a little satanic a little bit with all those 6s. I'm a little worried about that.
Yes. But this is so fun that you're here on our 299th episode. Next week is our big 300th episode with Sierra Hull. So please make sure that if you haven't subscribe to Basic Folk so you don't miss that one. But we are pumped that you're here today. so that we can hear Mark talk to Gary Louris. Mark, what's going on with you lately?
Oh, man, a lot of stuff. I just finished a month-long Kickstarter, successfully funded, a campaign to fund my next 2 records. I've got a live record, my very first live record recorded with a string quintet that is coming out in April. And then I'm also using the Kickstarter to fund my next studio record, what'll be my 14th, I think.
Wow. Another stat.
Crazy. Yeah, lots of numbers flying around here. And then I also curate a wonderful concert series at a local museum here in the Boston area, the Charles River Museum of Industry and Innovation in Waltham, Massachusetts. And it's called the Second Shift Concert Series. And we are starting up our spring series on March 7th with Kathleen Parks. She of Twisted Pine fame, and also she's doing some solo stuff these days. So, yeah, really exciting.
I have been to these concerts at the Museum of Charles River Museum of Industry and Innovation. I love them. I wish I lived closer so that I could come more often. It's such a beautiful space. It's like a big, beautiful, old school factory that you're in the middle of watching a concert. It's so rad.
Like really old school, like the oldest vertically integrated factory in the United States.
Right.
And it's got like 40-foot ceilings. I tell people steampunk vibe, but cathedral sound, you know?
That is perfect.
How's that for an elevator pitch, right? Yeah.
Yeah. When's Kathleen playing again?
March 7th. Yep.
Okay.
Thursday.
Yes, big Kathleen Parks fans here at Basic Folk. She was just on the podcast. Twisted Pine just put an excellent record out last year, and Kathleen put a solo record out at the end of the summer. So she's popping.
Yeah.
She's doing her thing. Let's talk about Gary Louris.
Let's. You probably know Gary Louris as the leader of the Jayhawks, or as they refer to themselves, quote, a band from Minnesota. So humble. But the Jayhawks were among the pioneers of roots rock, of alt country, of Americana, whatever you want to call it. They've been making records where rock, pop, country, and other forms of American roots music overlap, like since the mid-1980s. That's a long time. But Louris's hidden superpower, in my estimation, is that he's kind of like a musical Swiss Army knife. He's basically got a creative skill for any application you could possibly want. You want him and his band to serve as an accompanist for some of our most distinctive singer-songwriters like Wesley Stace and Joe Henry? He can do that. Looking for achingly-perfect, near-fraternal harmonies on hit songs like Counting Crows' Mr. Jones? He can and did do that. If you're the Tedeschi Trucks Band or the Dixie Chicks and you're looking for someone to write some catchy melodic roots pop songs, Gary is your guy. And if that's not enough, he has also produced records for artists like Dar Williams, who I'm sure has been here on the podcast. Whatever your musical need, chances are Gary Louris can do it. In between all these very musical roles, Louris has also found time to make several solo albums, the newest of which, Dark Country, or if we should probably say Dark Country, was released earlier this month, just a couple weeks ago. He recorded it mostly solo in his home studio, and the word on the street is that this collection of songs, inspired by his wife, is his most intimate and romantic album yet. I have been a big fan of Gary Louris for basically my entire adult life and enjoyed a wide-ranging conversation with him, touching on the way technical limitations can shape an artist's style, what he's learned from a career's worth of collaborations, his process working on his new solo album, the relationship between versatility and longevity, and what the influence of romance on his songwriting looks like now in his 5th decade of his musical career. So yeah, I was really psyched to get the call to do this one, and I tried to be cool. I'm not sure I succeeded, but listen on and you'll find out.
All right, we're going to take a listen to a clip from one of Gary's new songs. And also, you mentioned this in the interview, but Gary is about to turn 70?
Yes, I believe, if Wikipedia is true. So
okay,
who
so
knows?
this song, quite poignant. I mean, Wikipedia used to be garbage, but I feel like it's legitimate now. This song is especially poignant in thinking about that fact. The song is Getting Older, and then we'll hear from our conversation between Gary Louris and Mark Erelli on Basic Folk.
your life away. Neglect's abuse in its own way. You haven't come this far to end up who you are. Dark days and you came face to face. Your dreams, they ran in second place. There's life outside that door. Old fear kills slow but sure. And time won't wait for you to make decisions that lurk in the dark, while breaking each other's hearts. And we're just getting older.
Man, it's great to be on here with you, Gary. I should just admit straight off that I've just been a giant Jayhawks fan and fan of your songwriting and guitar playing and singing for basically my entire adult life. And we have many people in common, but I don't think our paths have ever crossed. So I'm glad they're crossing in this way.
And where are you located?
I'm in Boston, just outside Boston. A town called Melrose, and I just missed you the last time you guys were here. I don't know how much background, if any, you got on me, but I'm a singer-song. What's that?
I didn't get much, or I didn't.
Sure, no, that's fine. No, that's fine. Just briefly, I'm a singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer myself. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've seen the Jayhawks exactly once when I think you did a duo set at the Newport Folk Festival in 1995, a long time ago.
Wow, 1995.
Yeah.
So a duo meaning like just me and Olsen?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. And I remember you did this amazing cover of "You Don't Miss Your Water," the William Bell song.
Yeah, great song.
Which I love. Yeah, but in recent years, I've always been working on the same nights that you guys have been near me, and I just haven't had a chance to see the new version of the full band. But I'll get there. I'll get there.
Okay, we're still there. We're still around.
Yeah, man, I love that. Well, if you wouldn't mind, we'll just dive right in here and see how it goes.
Okay.
I don't know about you. I didn't grow up in a musical family. Music felt like my own kind of private refuge. It was something that I sort of kept to myself. And I wonder, how was music treated by your family? Was it something other family members did or avidly listened to? Or was it more your own thing or a source of rebellion? How has the role of music in your upbringing impacted the musician or the music listener that you've become?
It wasn't a real musical household. I mean, there was my father couldn't whistle a tune if he tried, and my sister was not a rock and roll fan. She loves music. She loves things like old Cole Porter, Irving Berlin kind of music, and probably the one person in my family that was was drawn to music was my mother, who was. Just listen to the radio. She was just a big Ella Fitzgerald fan, Frank Sinatra fan, but she loved her Andy Williams, Andy Baby, as she would call him, and Perry Como and that kind of thing. And she was the one, I think, who pushed me and my sister into taking piano lessons at a young age.
Yeah, okay.
So, but I hear all these stories of people like my daddy played in a band, or my brothers played, or this or that, or I grew up singing in church, and I really didn't have any of that. It's a miracle that I'm actually a musician, because there was a little stack of records, vinyl, in our living room, and a hi-fi, and the record collection was mostly things like stereophonic test records, Mantovani, Ferrante and Teicher, the Singing Nun soundtrack, My Fair Lady, a lot of soundtracks. There was really not much. There were 3, I guess you could call them rock records that my sister owned that I never remember her playing. One was Rolling Stones' Flowers. Another was Peter and Gordon of Cabbages and Kings. I remember that. And the third one was Sgt. Pepper. And I don't remember those ever being played by anybody but myself. And so that was it. I mean, that's the home I grew up in. And in general, my family, there's not a lot of, they would be the first to admit, not a lot of musical talent, or I'm always told that I'm the one who got the ear. So, yeah, you can, I would definitely was not surrounded by it.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it sounds like something you really had to kind of discover and delve into on your own. It was very, very similar with me. My parents always tell me that they thought that I must have been switched at birth at the hospital or something, because no one else in the family is musical. That's amazing. So you know, obviously, to state the obvious, you've done a lot of things in your career, and we'll touch on a bunch of that in a bit. But I would say you're probably most well known as a singing, songwriting, guitar player. Probably fair to say, pretty general. I'm curious if you remember exactly why you started writing songs. Do you still connect or relate to that initial songwriting impetus now, or have your reasons for writing songs evolved over the years?
That's a good question. I mean, I didn't start writing as many things in my life kind of late to the party. I wasn't in a band until I was out of college. I took 6 or 7 years of piano lessons, also like classical. And then when I was 14, my mother, knowing I was a very shy person, thought it would be a good idea if I started playing guitar, because her vision was that there were all these kind of kumbaya moments of folk parties, and that I would be going to these parties and be the center while playing these songs while everybody was around me singing along, and all of a sudden I would come out of my shell and become really popular. In a certain way it worked. But so at 14, I started playing. I took classical guitar lessons for a year. And that was my guitar. I had a nylon string classical guitar from when I was 14 to when I was like 19. I didn't really have anything else. But I started listening to the radio, and I found I had a natural ear for it. It came easily to me to listen to something and be able to learn it. So I learned to read music on piano and then guitar, but I mostly learned how to play guitar by copying things I heard off the radio or the records. The writing happened in my 20s, and I don't remember what was the impetus, other than I really don't remember why all of a sudden I started writing. I know there was a band that some of my friends were in, or that I knew through people, who were looking for songs, and I was living with this roommate, John, and we decided we'd try to write a song for the band. And I started there, and then I found I could write songs, and I remember I had a reel-to-reel tape deck, and I heard my voice for the first time, and I really was, I liked my voice, you know, and I just started writing songs, and I think I write them to this day for the same reason. It gives you purpose. It feels creating something from nothing is very powerful, and it gives you meaning. You know, identify what do I do? You know, who am I? And it's something that feels it expands the world. You know, it expands life, in that you feel you're doing something. It's funny enough that songwriting really starts off as a selfish exercise. You're doing something kind of for yourself, but in the long run, it's probably one of the few things I feel like I do for other people.
Yeah.
By way of a selfishness, you know.
It's really interesting. You touched on both your singing voice and your guitar playing on that, and you're kind of segueing right into the things that I have on the page here. If you'll bear with me for a second, I'd just like to share a short story that does lead to a question. When I went to college, one of my new friends was a Midwestern kid, right? And he shared with me his copy of Blue Earth, the early Jayhawks record. I was not familiar with the band at the time. And then just a couple weeks into our first year at college, Hollywood Town Hall dropped, right? And that made a pretty big impact on me. And after learning how to change chords kind of dependably as a rhythm guitarist, only recently by then, I had just kind of figured out how to go from, G to C to D and whatnot. Once I had that under my fingers, I immediately hungered to be able to play lead guitar, right? The holy grail. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit that I put on Hollywood Town Hall and I plugged my acoustic guitar into this like crappy, like half-blown, tiny, solid-state practice guitar amp, and I would try to imitate your guitar licks on Hollywood Town Hall. That was part of my learning soundtrack for the instrument that I play for my living now. But here's the thing. I couldn't do it. I couldn't really do it. But those attempts at imitation combined, with my own limitations, set me on a path to kind of making my own style. You kind of already hit upon this, but did conscious imitation play a role in your early approach to learning the guitar? And have you found that you've translated some limitations into kind of part of what's become your style?
Well, absolutely. You start by, whether it was songwriting or guitar playing, start by typically mimicking people you admire. So I wanted to sound like my early guitar heroes were really Pete Townsend and Jimmy Page.
Yep.
Were starters. I'm sure there were many others. Eventually it became Clarence White. And those are kind of the three that I most gravitated to. I liked a lot of Michael Bloomfield stuff and people like that. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some people, but the first ones that come to mind are those guitar players. And I remember listening to a lot of Zeppelin when I was young, learning, Jimmy Page licks on my nylon string, crappy classical guitar. And so that's, just like songwriting. First song I wrote was probably trying to sound like, I was very much a power pop kid. So, I was trying to write a song like Big Star. And then then eventually my second song, I think took the song Surrender by Cheap Trick and reversed the chords. And then, eventually get your own legs. It's funny that you mentioned my guitar playing because there was a time in my teens and even maybe early 20s where I really practiced like 4 hours a day. And then that just, I don't know if it was just laziness or just an excuse or just was what needed to be, but I decided I wanted to be more of a guitar playing songwriter than a songwriting guitar player. I really wanted to be, I like to think if I'm going to sit down for 3 hours, I'd rather try to write a song than to work on my scales. Yeah. And then, of course, listening to certain people, like eventually even like Neil Young. I didn't really grow up listening to Neil Young, but I found I enjoyed players who were not necessarily always the fastest or the most technically proficient, but I liked guitar players with tone and and melodic sensibility. Now, Jimmy Page had both, so he had it all. So,
Yeah.
He's still to me, probably, I love Hendrix and a lot of great guitar players, but to me, Jimmy is still the guy who combines the nasty, kind of almost scary side, a mysterious, dark rock and roll with a real beautiful phrasing. I like the fact that he can be a bit sloppy. As getting back to Neil Young too, I remember reading something that I thought was interesting. It was about George Harrison, listening to Neil Young with Eric Clapton and saying, "What is this shit?" He just didn't get he didn't get Neil's playing at all, at least in this article I read.
That's amazing.
So I don't know if I answered your by starting, by mimicking, by listening to people, and then the other thing I really started tackling was I really got into Clarence White, and I'm sure you know who he is. And
sure, yeah.
There's this one record called "The Birds Play Dylan," which was, I don't remember if it was live or not. All this great Clarence playing, overplaying really, but it was great. And I learned a lot of stuff off that, not knowing there was something called a B-bender. So I ended up coming up, like you said, kind of created your own style through a filter of your heroes and maybe your shortcomings or a different talent different voice.
Yep. Yeah, that's fascinating to think of trying to recreate some of the Clarence White stuff, not knowing about B-benders and just trying to find a way around, how to make those sounds with your fingers,
Yeah, kind of my stupidity led to me developing my own style.
Yeah, ignorance can be quite the innovator for sure. It's really fascinating to talk with you. Hear about like the nylon string guitar. I mean, when I went to college, I was borrowing my high school bandmate's nylon string guitar. I was a drummer in high school, but I borrowed his nylon string guitar, and I found myself hating the nylon strings, so I just snipped them off and I put steel acoustic strings on there. And I think it lasted probably a couple of weeks before I snapped the neck, and had to get something stronger. But those early limitations they're not something to be avoided. Though I guess you don't really know that at the time. That you're gonna carry them with you as part of your musical DNA. But I hear all those references you're talking about. I can hear particularly the Jimmy Page reference in some of that early Jayhawks stuff for sure. Right around the time in the kind of the early to mid 90s when I discovered the Jayhawks, you and Mark Olson had kind of an uncanny habit of sort of popping up on all my favorite records from artists like Joe Henry and Maria McKee and Counting Crows and Wallflowers and more. In addition to my own stuff, I also occasionally serve as a sideman for other artists, and I always say that I have the best seat in the house on these gigs. And in addition to serving them as an accompanist, I'm able to learn so much about the craft of music simply from watching a great artist work up close. Does that resonate with you? And if so, what are some of the things that you might have learned from the artists that you've backed up that kind of stand out in particular?
I think I've learned more from producers I've worked with than maybe musicians, like people you're mentioning that I was on their records. I'm trying to think about. I don't know if I can. I found myself really going to school on people, producers especially, like just working with Bob Ezrin, working with George Draculius. Funny enough, some of the musicians I learned more from than maybe real famous ones are people maybe you wouldn't know, like a band called the Sadies, who are from Toronto. Just to watch them work and their vocabulary as a band, how they wrote songs completely different than anything I would have ever. The method was completely different, where they would actually be asking me when I produced them, what what do you think of this idea? And I'm like, well, it has no melody at all yet, or words. They kind of build it up from like the rhythm and some chords, and they'd get really far before they'd ever put melodies and music on it. So that just seeing and working with Dallas Good was really interesting because he was such a had such a wealth of knowledge about gear, and I love the combination of what they did, which represented a lot of my favorite music, which was garage rock, psychedelic rock, spaghetti western, kind of Morricone kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All the the Bird country rock. They could do all these and mix it together. It's not exactly what you're asking, but I think if I were to pick a musician that was really inspiring to work with, would be Ray Davies, or Ray Davis, as they say.
Sure, yeah.
I always call him Ray Davies. But just to be in the room with him and watch him still so passionate about every little aspect of the recording.
Yeah.
He was, as I've said in other interviews, the Beatles had George Martin and Glenn Johns and Phil Spector. The Stones had Jimmy Miller and Glenn Johns and Andrew Goldham, and the Kinks were pretty much produced by Ray, and they're really cool sounding records, especially after the early ones. He did it, kind of like Jimmy.
Yeah.
Jimmy Page was also a great producer in his own right. But watching Ray, having the honor to work with him, I think was just eye-opening. He was kind of new to the whole Pro Tools thing when we worked with him, and it was just interesting to see. He was like a kid in the candy store, like, wow, we can do this, we can fix this, we can do all these different takes, and I'm like, okay, be careful.
Yeah,
because too many options is not a good thing. I've learned that, and he was so detailed and joyous when he worked, and he directed in a way that was like a theatrical production. Like he once told me to sing more like an underachiever. That was his direction when I was singing backgrounds. He wanted it looser, but the way he said things was, I think working with him was a thrill, just like being able to be on stage with Johnny Cash would be like two of the biggest musical thrills I think I've had.
Well, if the internet is to be trusted, you have a college degree in architecture. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. I find this fascinating because I often approach and teach songwriting through kind of an architectural lens, like thinking about how different sections of songs kind of are linked together to serve as the bones of the song, and then how the structure of a song can kind of amplify or its message or impact. Like, did you carry any of that architectural training over into your songwriting or production style? Do you see any kind of analogs there?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've taught some songwriting classes, and it's kind of my MO. It's my shtick, really. It's not really a shtick because it's true, but it's about designing a house and writing a song. Has very much the same thing, and the design process carries through all the different arts. But I think symmetry, balance, flow, as you know, as an architect would not design the entryway and the closet and the living room and the dining room, and you get an overall flow, right? You get a feeling from start to finish, just like in architecture. There's a bubble diagram, and then then you tighten it all up, and but you get a feeling of the whole song, and that you don't work. I think I see people have troubles when they are trying to write the next line, and then the next line, and you get bogged down in an area, and like you got to pull out, and you got to look at it. You got to get to the end and come back, and don't get stuck in one spot because you lose perspective. So, yes, definitely. I say that a lot. It's a very similar process of zooming in, zooming out, flow, balance, symmetry, and from bubble diagram to which would be
great. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Musically, it would be your mumbles into your phone or whatever, and then to the final thing. So
yeah, sure. Yeah, can't get around.
And it's
that.
Mathematical too.
You talked about your singing voice earlier, and I wondered if we could kind of turn there for a little bit. Of course, you spent the lion's share of your career in a band with multiple vocalists, especially one for a long time where you had, kind of a synergistic, very close harmony partner. And I know for me, when I'm working with, say I play in a bluegrass band sometimes, not my native genre, but I find that when I'm working with that band, there are just certain ways of singing, certain dynamic approaches that work best. And I'm wondering, do you gravitate towards certain parts of your voice or your vocal dynamic range as a solo artist that you might avoid when you're fronting a band? Like, how does your relationship to your singing voice change when you're making a solo record versus when, versus where you're in a band format and there's multiple singers?
Yeah. Well, certainly it changes whether I'm singing with, like in the early days with Olson, where it's more of an Everly Brothers, Louvin Brothers kind of thing, to more of a 3-part harmony thing with Karen and Tim, and whether it's side projects where I sing differently with the Smog or Tweety or something like that. But solo, I guess it's just I can get quieter, I can sing lower, because I'm just not a rock vocalist. I'm not a loud singer. And so with a band, it's very hard for me to sing anything low because I don't get much output. So I have to, a lot of my stuff is the sweet spot as a tenor. But when I play solo or make a solo record, I can get a little more, I'm not competing with, a lot of times I'm competing with my own loud electric guitar playing. So I'm my own worst enemy sometimes. But yeah, that's the main thing I think solo-wise is I can get lower, quieter, and I do enjoy all the different forms of singing, but I do, in this point in my life, really love the solo, playing quietly in a live show, because I can get really much more dynamic.
I'm thinking, you talked about the solo versus, the band stuff. Like, obviously this can be a challenging business, and the teamwork and the camaraderie of a band can really be a valuable source of strength and support. While it can also be a bit more lonely to be a solo singer-songwriter, there's also kind of a palpable sense of creative freedom that comes with that, right? Like, as you get deeper into your career, can you talk about how you think about the balance between these two approaches? I mean, I think you mentioned that you kind of prefer, for live performance, you might prefer the solo singer-songwriter thing at this point, but can you speak more about that?
Well, I prefer the solo singer-songwriter thing.
Of course.
As especially for the singing, I still like to strap on the electric guitar, and that'll be hard to ever walk completely away from. But I remember when you talked about Joe Henry, and long ago, I don't really talk to Joe very much anymore, but he was solo, and I was in a band, and I was like, we just said the grass was always greener, because he was like, oh man, it'd be great to have a band, and I was like, God, it'd be great to not have a band, it is, because the band is, it's kind of a dysfunctional family in a way, and it can be because you've been through the wars together, and you have all these experiences together. But you've also spent a lot of time together, which can make you think you know that person better than they know themselves. And I'm speaking for what they think of me too. So it's kind of a brotherhood. It's very close, but you can also, over years and years, small things can turn into bigger things on all sides. So there is the beauty of showing up with an acoustic guitar and plugging in. That is still kind of newer for me because it was only my third solo record, and I had played a fraction of solo shows compared to band shows. So it's somewhat still kind of a shiny new toy for me.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about this new solo record, Dark Country. I really have been enjoying listening to it. And I believe, did you record most of it at home there in a home studio setup?
All of it.
Yeah.
All
okay.
of it at home, except the overdubs I had, what do you call it? Remotely.
Yeah.
Stephen McCarthy on a couple songs, and then the strings that were on By Your Side that were done by Eleanor Masterson. Masterson.
Cool.
Eleanor Masterson? Yeah. Not
Yep.
Whitmore.
Yeah.
Anna Whitmore, yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the Mastersons, but...
Yes, yeah.
and Chris, yeah.
Yep, through
So
Steve
yeah,
Earle.
I have a nice... It's more than like a studio laptop next to my bed.
Yep.
It's a very nice studio. I was able to procure years ago from my friend Paco in Spain, Paco Loco, it's a beautiful Neve EQs and compressors.
Oh, wow.
Vintage ones that just elevate everything you do, and pretty much soundproofed. And so, I mean, it started off as a record I thought about getting a group of people together and doing mostly live and in a studio. And as time went on, and we tried to find ways to do it here in Canada with grants and so forth.
Sure.
The process is so long that I just decided, somebody's going to walk by with a dog. I'll tell you, he goes crazy. While I was waiting to do for the applications and other, I just started recording, and it just became clear that this is what the record felt like it should be. There are love songs. They are love songs to my wife, a Canadian woman I met in 2019 at a show in Toronto, and we, found the love of my life later in life, and I wrote. Most of my songwriting has always been kind of more imagery and vague, and mixing up different stories. Not so much autobiographical. Mm-hmm. But this was a truly autobiographical record where almost all of them are just straight love songs. So it seemed appropriate to have a guitar and a voice and keep it very simple. And that's so it started off not by design, but quickly it became apparent it was very apropos to make a record this way.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear you talk about the process, because I can hear on a song like Getting Older how, like, there's a place for all the musicians to kind of come in there and do like a full band format sort of thing. And for me, I feel like when I listen to my songs, they almost kind of tell me what they want when I'm recording them, as a producer. And it sounds like you might agree with that. Like, you just, as you started exploring them, you found like this is what they wanted to be. And so you kind of just went down that road instead.
Yeah, I mean, people have asked before, how do you know when a song's a Jayhawks song? When do you know when it's supposed to be a Golden Smog song? When is it supposed to be a solo song? When is it for somebody else? And it's like you said, the song kind of finds its own way. Same with a record. You hear about this when people write books. It's like, well, it takes on a life of its own.
Yes.
And that's why whenever I produced or started a record as a musician or producer, you make plans, but they're pretty loose.
Yeah.
And you say, it's going to take on a life of its own. It's going to go where hopefully it's supposed to go. Doesn't mean that the next record, I'm already thinking the next record I'd like to have like 48 tracks of virtual strings and weird synthesizer. You want to do something different. And then you come back. But I don't know if I'll do that. But it's found its own way. And it really started by just going down into the studio and next thing you know, I'm like, wait a minute, this is becoming a record.
Right. Yeah. Now, do you find like it's kind of challenging to ask questions like this because, of course, you didn't have access to the same technology as a younger artist like you do now? Like you probably didn't have this great studio in your living situation, growing up. But like, do you have a different relationship to the patients and involved in that process and kind of listening to the songs? Are you better able to hear what they're telling you now because you have a place where you can experiment?
I was just what is it? When you said they're telling you the songs themselves, or are you talking about?
Yeah. I'm thinking like the songs. If we kind of agree that the songs sort of will reveal what they want to us, sometimes when you're younger and you're a little bit more impatient, maybe a little less experienced, and you also, it was a different recording technology era, right? Like you didn't have maybe always the entire afternoon or whatever to kind of just sit and experiment in a studio. Do you find that the experience kind of interacting with your access to cheap recording technology, like do you find that helps you kind of better dial into what the songs are trying to ask of you?
I've never been Mr. Patient. It's like my son makes music. It's really cool. HenryLouris.com. Give him a plug.
Yeah.
Some of his stuff's on Spotify, and he, like some other people I know, is very meticulous and keep going over the same thing and never satisfied and laboring over different reverb gates and EQs and different. I'm a bit more, not to equate myself to Bob Dylan, but kind of like, let's do it and move on to the next song. I mean, I've really never been super patient with until you get into fixing things. When you're in Pro Tools or whatever you're in, once you start down that road, it's hard not to. But I'm still fairly impatient person in the studio. It certainly is a lot different than when I first started. And, my first recordings were on a Philips reel-to-reel in the late 70s probably, and experimenting with multi-tracking and was bouncing tracks over. And then after that, it really went from there to being in a band, and then had the honor of and the luck to record in these really amazing studios in LA, and really seeing the classic studios. But I was never a real tech head. I know enough to get by, and I still use the software more like a tape deck than anything else. Doesn't mean I don't do some experimenting that most likely is vanity project stuff. I don't know how many people want to hear me manipulating radio frequencies and mixing them up, but I have done that kind of stuff. I love doing that because way before I ever listened to any Americana, I was a total prog rock kid. So
I heard about this. Yeah, I did a little research, and I was surprised to hear that. Because my experience with you is like one of the pioneers of the kind of alt country sort of sound, and to hear that prog rock was such a prominent role in your history was surprising.
Yeah, it was all British rock for me, and then prog rock. I loved Genesis, all that stuff. I still do.
Oh, that's
I still like a lot of that, but it's I came into Americana I was in a British rock cover band, my first band, Schnauzer, and the lead singer brought down in his basement. We didn't really play out. We played like 1 or 2 shows. We were mostly for fun. But the lead singer, Jake, brought down a copy of, I can still see him walking down the stairs with a copy of Sun Sessions, Elvis Presley.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to hear this. And
Oh, man.
that just opened up so at 20-something years old, I discovered, through Elvis Presley, I learned about the blues and country music and then soul music and bluegrass and Western swing and all those kind of things that I hadn't listened to. So to me, my music is the framework, the chassis of my music and my songwriting is like British rock. And then on top of that is added what I found was the depth and soulfulness you get with traditional music. So, because I don't really write country songs. I mean, there's always 4 too many chords in my songs, or passing chords, or things that are not that rootsy.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm the same way. I rely heavily on some of those sorts of passing chords, and my friends joke that I come off like a folk singer, but I really write jam busters, because if you're playing these songs around a campfire, you're like, oh yeah, I get how this goes, until you don't.
Yeah, no, it's true, very true. Jam buster, that's a good. Yeah, I don't know how many songs. I mean, if somebody said, "Come up and get up and play, and we'll follow you," I'm like, good luck.
Terrifies
it's
me.
Not like it's not like complicated jazz music, but there's always a few chords that derail the whole jam session. So yeah, I know
Jam buster. There you go.
Jam buster, I like it. But recording wise, I don't know. I definitely learn more than as time has gone on. But what I found is I regress pretty quickly because of continuing to make records, touring. You are gone. I work on stuff and then I don't for months, and then you're like, how did I do that again? You're constantly learning some things and then forgetting them. I mean, if I wasn't a touring musician and I just was in there making music for syncs or producing every day, I think I could be dangerous. I think I could be good. I mean, it's just like
I'm sure
these videos I'm making for Dark Country is they're pretty good. I mean, I think I could have back in the day had some stuff on MTV, but it's because iMovie works in a similar way as Pro Tools, and cutting and pasting. So, and then writing a song is similar to putting together a video where you want it to move, you want it to peak and come down. And so it's a little bit of that. So, but that's another one of those things, like, I think if I could have just done one thing, like been a studio guy, I could have really advanced my skills a lot more. But I'm pretty good at the technical side, pretty good at the songwriting, pretty good at the live things. So that's where I've ended up, just pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like you're kind of a musical Swiss Army knife. Like you've got a...
I am the musical Swiss Army knife.
Listening to your catalog of work, both with the bands and solo, like, there's a lot of double-tracked vocals. There's, mellotron, lots of acoustic guitars and harmonica. And there are other flourishes and details in your music that could, probably could be considered by some to be like vintage or kind of retro. But I also see you're fairly active with live streaming and Bandcamp and Patreon and other digital platforms, and you're talking about experimenting in iMovie. So, and in a song on your new record, you admit to, living on my phone, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious what your relationship to musical technology is. Do you kind of embrace all these new toys as integral and exciting new tools for creating, or are there times when you feel like there's enough, like I have to kind of keep it at arm's length?
Well, at the risk of sounding like a fuddy-duddy, I think they've been more harmful than good. I think the age of real recording was done before most of these things existed. I think it's a love-hate relationship with technology. I hate it more than I love it until I'm on a GPS or there's some medical issue where it's really, really helpful, or being able to FaceTime. But that song, Living on My Phone, it's not so much that I'm not a big social media person at all. In fact, I don't like it at all, but except I do it when I have to. But that was when I met my wife, Steph, before we were married, and COVID happened, and it's somewhat about having to thank God for it, FaceTime at that time, and we could be together even though I couldn't cross the border. But it is also about other people we know who are attached to their phone. And when you start watching people and you look at families at dinner and all four of them are sitting on their phone, it's sad, and just the way that your brain has become reprogrammed so that it has it's such short attention span. People can't stand in line without having to occupy themselves, or I don't know how we used to do it. So I love it in certain ways. I love being able to send, we transfer things, and I like that I can make music in my studio downstairs without waiting for Ocean Way to open up and spend so much time, money. But in the long run, I think, and it depends on what you call technology. I mean, 2-inch tape is still technology back then. It's like, but computers, there's no going back. It's like, I love the idea. I respect people. So many people I ever hear say, "Oh, I don't have a phone," or they probably don't have kids either. Because you kind of have to stay in touch.
Truth.
But in general, I see it more devices being more harm than good. But it's such a generalization.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I agree with a lot of that.
With Pro Tools, such a thing as too many options. It's just like as you probably know, if you don't make the decisions early, you're left with a larger mountain of things to go through. I don't know how I wrote songs before having an iPhone, but I did.
So you're not much of a notebook guy anymore?
No, not really. I mean, I do when I'm getting into lyrics, but yeah. So long answer is I appreciate technology. It's kind of like alcohol or anything. It's in moderation. It's good, but when it becomes all about technology, like most songs today, I will hear. Unfortunately, most of the music I hear, new music, is stuff that's piped into an airplane or in a shopping center or a restaurant, where for some reason people think you have to play this music constantly. And I listen to it, and it doesn't sound like people in the same room. There's so much air has been sucked out of these recordings that it doesn't sound human,
Man, preaching to the choir here. I'm a big fan of, I call it working at the pace of inspiration, right? So just, having an idea, following that idea, making choices that do constrain you later on, and that's part of the process for me. And I find, as you were saying, the limitations kind of bumping up against them. I find it helpful creatively. Like, even still, like walking into a record store can be a bit overwhelming. I love going to them, but it feels like there's so much music I don't know where to start. It's the same thing when you open up all your, plugins or whatever. It's like I could make this different for days, but I don't know if any of that would be making it better,
Right. I'm totally in agreement with you.
Yeah.
It's fun to have those little plugins, and of course they have all the cool graphics that make them look like the old Fairchild or something, but they're not.
Yeah.
And I still have great satisfaction in doing something with them, like the one song off the streaming version of the record is called Perfect Day, which is a Harry Nilsson song.
Yes,
and
yeah.
It was, I had gotten a call from my publisher saying this show, Better Call Saul, is looking for a version of Perfect Day by Harry Nilsson. Can you recreate it? I was, like pretty much giving me the task, which was really fun. I liked doing that. So I went and before I even had my real studio set up, I did this, and it was a labor of love. And I go back and listen to them. It's just layers of choral and pseudo strings, and I'm really proud of it, and I get much joy out of it. It's much different song than anything else on the record. But again, yeah. So I'm not that guy who says a song's only good if you can play it on acoustic guitar and a vocal. I don't believe that.
Yep.
I mean, but it can be. It doesn't hurt if you can pick it up and play it on acoustic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of leads right into my next question here. Like, so there's so many ways to kind of, quote unquote, be a songwriter, right? Like a guy like Dylan, you probably primarily think of as a lyricist. Others like Paul Simon, kind of in a self-professed way, or kind of hyper-focused on the groove. And I guess if I had to single out one through line, kind of for your sound as a fan and a listener, I guess I'd say it's a pretty deep sense of kind of classic pop melody. And it just seems like there's typically more melody or catchier melodies, maybe jam-busting melodies in your compositions than your average, kind of Americana, 3 chords and the truth sort of songwriter. Can you talk about your relationship to melody and its role in your songwriting? Is that a fair interpretation?
I think so. I think melody rules for me, and I know that there, like in the early days when the other guy was in the band also, I think you could hear I think he wrote more around the lyrics, and I think the lyrics led a little bit, and for me, I think the melody leads. It's not without, I just, to me, a song with a great melody can survive more than and an okay lyric than a great lyric and a lousy melody. I still am drawn to the power of melody, and my melodic sense, I'm pretty aware, is not very fashionable. It's a little bit old school. It's kind of comes back to haunt me sometimes, but I can't get away from wanting that kind of lift and a real powerful melody that I just don't hear much anywhere else, I think, and it makes me think, is it's out of fashion? I don't know. Is it? I listen to so many things that are hits and or on a lot, and I think I would never have even pursued that idea because it's so dumb and not but it's annoyingly catchy. I get these emails from BMI, just everybody on BMI gets, just like everybody to ask him, like how to improve your miking, or what people are looking for in a sync. And I rarely read them, but I was clearing my emails the other day and started, I'll look at some of these, and one of them was like, well, you'll increase your chance of sync placement 80% if you add a nonsense whoa, 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 or yeah, or ooh, woo at the end of the chorus, and you're like,
oh no,
wow, this is what. It did say something like check your ego at the door when you start reading this.
Wow.
Because I have tried to do some commercial work in the past.
Sure.
I find it's fun. I like having our old drummer started one of the larger music houses in the world or in the country a number of years back. Tad Spencer, and he, once in a while bring me in to do some singing or, maybe write something. And I found it's a completely different animal. It's like it's you really have to dumb it down. You have to. It's a different method of writing. Even when I did have a time where I went to the Sundance Film Composers Lab in, I think it was 2006, and I found, boy, there's another thing really interesting. I would love to do more of that, but it's a different way of songwriting. You don't want to. Gone are the days of the Bernard Herrmanns or the people who wrote really strong melodies, Morricone. Now it's mostly things that don't distract, or like soundscapes. So that was eye-opening to me. But my melody will always lead. I find I write melody and lyrics kind of at the same time. The sound of the words, that classic method of just sing cauliflower or whatever Lennon said to Harrison.
Sure.
Placeholders which become real things because the sound of the words are sometimes as important.
Yep.
And I usually find my meaning, if not ahead of time, then eventually by the end of the song I kind of just start singing what I'm singing about in a sort of therapy kind of way.
That's amazing. Yeah, I really resonate with all that. I feel like I've kept you here, for a while. I appreciate your patience. If you do you have time for one more question? Is that
sure?
Is that okay? Your first single off the new record is called "Getting Older," so I hope it's not a faux pas here to say that you have a big birthday coming up, a big milestone.
I do. 70 years old.
Yeah, in a month or so. So first off, happy birthday. That's incredible.
Thank you so much.
As you approach 70, you're releasing kind of what you're billing as your most intimate and romantic album. We've heard so much about how age brings wisdom and philosophical insights, and that while love changes and endures over time, kind of conventional wisdom has romance often waning with the years, right? Like, what is it about this phase in your life that makes you specifically want to delve more deeply into romanticism? Are there aspects of romance that you have perspective on now that you might not have had access to as a younger artist?
Wow, that's a heavy question. Well, I think starts with it finding the love of my life later in life, and just finally having somebody to sing these songs to and about, and it just, I don't think it was anything calculated. I don't know why it took so long for me to find her, but it did, and we're kind of joined at the hip, and we do everything together, and it just seemed so natural to be writing songs about her as my muse. As far as more wisdom about love now as you've gotten older, I think it's tempered, it's because I'm getting older, and there's a song on the record that says there's, less ahead, more behind, and you start seeing, you can't deny that you're, I'm going to be 70. I'm proud of being 70. But I don't know. I know where some people at this point, maybe they've been in marriages that were okay. That's the thing I liked about, there's a few songs like that, living in the gray kind of area, which is, I think, what is a tough place to be, because black and white are much clearer. You're in a great relationship, you're in a terrible relationship, but when you're in that in-between, that's a hard place to live, and a lot of people are okay with it. My wife and I, neither of us were. So I think I don't know. I think it's the new face of love. I don't know, making love cool again. But don't really have a real insight, other than it just was inspired by meeting the person I was supposed to be with all this time, and instead of going, why did it take so long? We try to maximize every moment we have. When people say, well, we've been married for, what is it, honey, 4 years? 22. And we're saying, we just lie, so we've been married 22 years. Coming up to 5. Yeah, coming up to 5 years.
Wow. So you seem, I mean, just talking to you, I know we just met, but you seem energized by it. And you're talking about the next record and, kind of all this stuff. Yeah,
I am. I mean, I want to keep, we're going to make another Jayhawks record. We're going on our 40th anniversary of the band. And there's a book that's being written about us I'm excited about because the author's really good and it's a good publisher. And, after all this time, I think, although we will not go on forever touring, I think there'll be, we still are lucky to, I always wanted to be that guy who's like, we'll burn out quick and people really miss us. And I didn't want to be those people who are still playing and looks like we're hanging on, but we're not hanging on. We're actually making new music. And then as the time has gone on, I just realized how lucky we are. How many people would like to have longevity to their career and without just playing the casino circuit or whatever. But
So I just wanted to thank you for your generosity here and kind of going deep and just thank you for all the music over the years. Like I said, I told my wife who I was talking to and kind of what it meant to me, and she kind of fixed me in her stare as she so normally does and says, "Are you going to be cool?" I was like, "I don't know."
You're very cool, I will say.
Well,
I will say, I was telling Steph, I said, I dread doing interviews. When you're first starting off, you're like, oh, cool, we're getting interviewed. Cool.
Someone cares.
Sound check. Somebody cares. I get to talk. And as you get older, it's just like, okay. But once in a while, I get a good one. This is a really good one. So
thanks.
At least you seem like a kindred spirit, and you write music, and we seem to have a similar attitude towards songwriting and things. So it was good.
Yeah, man. As you get further in, the work kind of has to be its own reward, right? Or else you don't last that long.
Gone are the days. I'm thinking about how I'm going to conquer the world with a new record, and now it's all about I want to just make something new that it feels good that didn't exist yesterday. So.
Yeah.
And if it's bad, nobody has to listen to it.
That's right. Well, mission accomplished. If I could just keep you for a couple minutes here, are you willing to do a lightning round with us? This is something that Basic Folk does at the end of a lot of the interviews. Just very short, kind of 1 or 2 word answers, kind of off the top of your head.
I'll try it. I'll see what it's like.
All right.
Depends what the subject matter is.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we can always make it sound better if we need to.
Okay.
All right, here we go. What is a song that makes you cry every time you hear it?
Moon River.
Would you say Blue River?
Moon River.
Oh, Moon River.
Henry
Gotcha.
Mancini.
Yeah,
I love. That's one thing about my dad. I said he didn't really have a musical bone in his body, but I remember, sitting in the old Pontiac Bonneville, with his L&M cigarette, windows rolled up, of course, sucking in secondhand smoke and listening to the easy listening stations in the 1960s. And I have fond memories of people like Mancini.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, Moon River is great. What is your least favorite household chore? We're going all over the place here.
Least favorite household chore? I would say cleaning the... I don't do anything. So actually, my wife has been at a minor surgery, so I've actually been doing some stuff more than usual, but not really... I would say
putting the dishwasher, emptying and loading.
Loading the dishwasher. She answers. I was going to say cleaning the toilets, but I don't do that. So
yeah, there you go.
Taking out the compost. Well, right. And where we live, I guess you could also say shoveling snow.
Sure. Yeah, it looks pretty full on winter there. How do you take your coffee?
With cream. Unless it's French press, then milk. And this is interesting because I found out most people in Canada, they take their coffee with milk, not cream. It's a very American thing to take cream in your coffee. In fact, when you go to the States and we go to a coffee shop, it's very unusual for them just to have milk. So
Yeah.
I take it with cream.
There you go. All right. What is the most beautiful place you've ever been to?
Most beautiful place I've ever been to is probably Paris. St. James Hotel, Paris, France.
Love it.
With my wife, of course. It's pretty spectacular here in the Laurentian Mountains also of Quebec.
Yeah, it looks beautiful out the window there. All right, one more if you would. Let's see. Okay, here we go. What is Gary Louris bringing to the neighborhood potluck? I don't know if there's much of a neighborhood where you are there, but like, do you have a specialty?
Neighborhood potluck? Yeah. I guess what I would bring is my classic dish, beef broccoli pie, which is my wife's shaking her head. You must know what I would bring to the potluck in the neighborhood.
Which we did.
What?
We blew them our way with our crudité.
Yeah, but this is me. Well, you're not. Yeah. What do I make? It's a recipe that my stepson loves. It's more like a comfort food. It's not exactly a tater tot casserole.
Yeah.
But you want me to answer more with a charcuterie plate and something classic?
No.
You know, beef broccoli pie is basically frozen broccoli, ground beef, onions, cream of mushroom soup. It's a heart attack waiting to happen. Monterey Jack cheese, cream cheese, Pillsbury crescent roll crust. It's totally. It's one of those things that like a 21-year-old boy would love to eat with instant mashed potatoes.
I should have just asked you what's not in it. That would have been quicker.
But the perfect side would be instant mashed potatoes, not mashed potatoes.
Oh,
it's just that kind of thing that I probably made, in my college days.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's a very humanizing answer to end on.
Yeah, well, I might as well be honest.
Love it.
Although, to be honest with you, I think my wife and I are both pretty much French food snob type kind of people, but that's more of a boring answer to say. And
plus you're not bringing that from the neighbors. Yeah. Amazing. All right. Well, we're done. Gary, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to meet you and to be able to thank you in person for
thank you, Mark.
Influence. Yeah.
My pleasure.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by C.J. Nungesser. Dietrich Strauss composes our music. Basic Folk is a production of the Bluegrass Situation. You can find all of our episodes there. You can search for Basic Folk on the SiriusXM app. You can check us out on folkalley.com or Folk Alley's mobile app. You can go to our website, basicfolk.com, or you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend. Like that guy that you roommated with in college in 1992 who first introduced you to alt-country music.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. Mark and I really love you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.